All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Unit 7, and it's called Christianity. The beginnings of Christianity take place during the Roman Empire. So we're going to be taking a look at really a small set of notes, but very important because Christianity is one of the 5 world religions that is focused during this course. Christianity has its roots in Judaism. What that means is, Judaism, as you remember, is the first monotheistic religion. So what we're going to be talking about is how the first Christians were actually Jewish first, but then they have a different set of beliefs. To make it simple, what it boils down to is they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So after this group of Christians separates, now you have 2 monotheistic religions, the Jews and the Christians. And then later we'll be talking about the Muslims. So, as you can see from the notes here, the origins of Christianity, as I stated, it has its roots in Judaism. So, there's a belief from the Old Testament that a Messiah is going to come and save everyone. Some Jews believe that Jesus of Nazareth is this Messiah, so he's proclaimed to be the Messiah. This conflicted with the polytheistic beliefs of the Roman Empire. So remember, the Romans believe in many different gods like Jupiter, Mars, etc. So this is a problem for them because they expect everyone not only to worship their polytheistic gods, but also the emperor. So what makes this complicated is the fact that not all Jews accepted that Jesus is the Messiah as proclaimed in the Old Testament. So those that believe become the first Christians. Those that do not believe remain Jewish. So you really have 2 types of disruption going on. Some Jewish people are not happy that Jesus is being proclaimed as the Messiah, and then the Roman government is not happy because it's conflicting with their beliefs. So that's why we have this turmoil during this Christian beginnings. So the beliefs, traditions, and practices of Christianity, first and foremost, obviously, it's monotheism. They believe there's one God. Now, just so you understand, it is the same God that the Jews believe in and also later the Muslims believe in. Christians believe that Jesus is both the Son of God and the incarnation of God. What is incarnation? So that means he is literally God on earth. Christians also believe in life after death, meaning they believe there's a heaven and there's also a hell. Now, this is confusing for a lot of people. When we think of Christianity, most people say the Bible, meaning that's their holy text. Well, kind of. The New Testament is their holy text. The New Testament contains the accounts of the life and the teachings of Jesus, as well as the writings of other early Christians. The reason we don't say just the Bible for Christians is because the Old Testament is really about the Hebrews, if you think about it. So the Bible is broken into the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament focuses before Jesus. The New Testament focuses on Jesus. Next, we have Christian doctrines established by early church councils. So doctrine is a set of beliefs in a church. So church councils are a group of people who get together and decide what beliefs they're going to have. They're deciding which beliefs are acceptable. And finally, we have the spread of Christianity. How did Christianity spread? So first and foremost, it's popular. It's a positive message. People who are rich in Roman times would donate large amounts of gold and animal sacrifices to the polytheistic religion. And there really wasn't a whole lot they felt good about. However, early Christians in Rome donated food. They gave lodging to poor Christians, and that made them feel good inside. So the message is very popular. Next, early martyrs inspired others. So what's a martyr? So martyrs are people who are willing to die for their beliefs. So, for example, the Romans literally would persecute Christians. Sometimes they would take them to the Roman Colosseum and they would feed them to animals as a public display. But what happens is it has the reverse effect that they intended. Many of the people in the audience felt sorry for them, or more importantly, they were inspired by them. What happens is they think to themselves, why would these people be willing to die for their religion? and it makes them interested and they start seeking out more information. But the most important is the apostles, including Paul, carried Christianity through the Roman Empire. So the abbreviation I always use for Christianity is CAP, C-A-P. Christianity spread by the apostles, including Paul. So who are the apostles? Many of you may have heard about Jesus' disciples. It's the same thing. So he has 12 disciples or 12 apostles. After Jesus' death, they spread out and go into different directions and they carry Jesus' message. Paul is famous because he is credited with spreading Christianity to non-Jews, meaning to Romans who believe in a polytheistic religion. So if you're Jewish, it's not that big of a step to transform to Christianity because really it boils down to, do you believe Jesus is the Messiah? However, if you're Roman, you believe in all these different gods that control different things, and it's a harder step to take. So that's why Paul gets credit for converting non-Jews into Christianity. Okay, so here's a released SOL question, and we're going to take a look at how I would expect you to do this. Look at the information box first. Believe in monotheism, Jesus. Now, Jesus is the key word. Once you see Jesus, that should be a real key for you. So these statements describe characteristics of early Christians. We associate Jesus with Christianity, but we still take the time to read the other answer choices, Buddhists, Muslims, etc. Okay, next. The Church of Rome. So that's Catholicism. Many of you have heard of the Catholic Church, but many of you probably don't know that's the first Christian church. What that means is after Christianity takes off and becomes popular, the first step is that the Emperor Constantine, he's a Roman emperor, he finds out that his mother, Helena, that she's actually Christian. So rather than fighting it, he becomes Christian himself. He makes Christianity legal. And eventually it becomes the official state religion of Rome. Think about that. Here in America, we don't have a state religion. We have freedom of religion. But in the Roman Empire, they decided that rather than having a polytheistic religion, that Christianity would become their official religion and that everyone was expected to be Christian. The church became a source for moral authority. So this is important because your morals are what determines right and wrong. So the church is basically laying it out for everyone that these are the things that are right and wrong. This is how you should live your life. So next in the notes, we have to understand what heresies are. So heresy is literally when you're contradicting the popular beliefs. So within Christianity, as with any religion, there are certain things that are accepted. So there's a small group of people that do not agree with those and they are contrary to them, meaning they're going against them. So the first one mentioned in the notes is called Arianism. So one of the key beliefs is that Jesus is both the Son of God and the incarnation of God on earth. People who believed in Arianism believed that he was created by God, therefore was not God on earth. And clearly that's against the beliefs of the majority of Christians, so therefore it's a heresy. So the second heresy group that we're supposed to understand is Donatism, and it's a little bit more complicated than Arianism. But the bottom line is they disagree with the majority of Christians and they go against the grain, which leads to them being called heretical. So the easiest thing for you is to just be able to identify Arianism and Donatism as heresies or not agreeing with the majority of Christians. And then finally, we have the church became the main unifying force in Western Europe. So we're going to get to the Middle Ages eventually, and that's a pretty fun unit. And in the Middle Ages, the Christian church, the Catholic Church, that is going to be basically the government. So that's something new, and you'll enjoy that unit a lot. Okay, so next we have another released SOL test question. This one has no graphics, so we're going to look at the answer choices. Sending Roman soldiers to the Middle East, legalizing Christianity. That sounds pretty familiar. Codifying Roman law in the Middle East, and unifying Europe, founding of the Holy Roman Empire. So the big thing here is, who are we talking about? Constantine. Legalizing Christianity was the one that sounded familiar, and if we remember, Constantine Christianity, he legalized Christianity. All right, last part of the note. So the first thing is a vocabulary word. We're going to be talking about the influence of the Church of Rome and the word secular. It says secular authority declined while church authority grew. So what you need to understand, because this is something you're going to talk about later as well during the Renaissance, secular is non-religious. So for example, if you go to public school, that is a secular school, meaning it's not a private school that's based on a religion. So if you go to a Christian school or an Islamic school, that's a religious school. A secular school will teach you about various religions, but they're not going to lead you in prayer. Another way you can think about that is secular music. If you listen to religious music, that would be religious, but secular is non-religious music. So most music on the radio, streaming, Apple Music, Spotify, etc., unless you specify that you want religious music, you're probably listening to secular music. So just think of secular as non-religious. So next, we have to look at Greco-Roman culture. That's Greek and Roman culture. Greek and Roman culture still influences us today. And one of the reasons is because it was preserved. When we get to the Dark Ages, you'll see how a lot of people lost the knowledge that the Greeks and the Romans had. But a monastery is a religious place for Christians where monks would live, and they would usually copy documents. They're almost like human copy machines, because obviously they didn't have those yet. So if you wanted a Bible, someone would have to hand write it for you. So these monasteries are where things like that occurred. So you should already know what missionaries are, because if you remember, we talked about Asoka's missionaries spreading Buddhism earlier. Now we're going to talk about Christian missionaries. They carried Christianity and the Latin alphabet to Germanic tribes. So that's another influence of the church. So next, the Pope anointed Charlemagne emperor in 800 AD. So first off, the Pope, he is the leader of the Catholic Church. Charlemagne is what becomes the first Holy Roman Emperor. He's a Frankish king, which is in France. France doesn't exist yet, but that's the land that later becomes France. So what this statement means, the significance of it is, the Pope has more power than Charlemagne. Now, in the Roman Empire, the emperor had all the power, but now the church has more power than the actual emperor. So piggybacking on the Pope, he's the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, but he can't serve everyone's individual needs. For example, if someone wants to get married. So there are parish priests that are spread out all through the regions, and they serve the social needs of the people. So if you need to get married, you don't have to travel to Rome. You can go to your local priest. So this unit is very short and very specific. There's not really any video game clips that I could put up as they wouldn't be really appropriate. So again, most of this unit, most of Christianity focuses on Jesus. So once you see Jesus, you should understand, hey, this is probably associated with Christianity. The other big factor is Constantine. Constantine is the Roman emperor who made Christianity legal. So next unit, we're going to talk about how Constantine also moves the capital from Rome to Constantinople. It's a city named Byzantium, but he changes the name after himself. So we'll get into that next unit. It's pretty interesting. So see you then.